rehabilitated, and real entertaining. This is the Carl Jackson Podcast.
All right, welcome to the Tuesday edition of the Carl Jackson Show podcast. I'm glad that you could join me today. Make sure you follow me on all social media, The Carl Jackson Show, wherever I am, whether that's Twitter, Getter, Truth Social, Facebook, Instagram, you name it, The Carl Jackson Show. Also, if you would subscribe to the podcast, I would greatly appreciate it. TheCarlJacksonShow.com, SalemPodcastNetwork.com, or wherever you go to get your podcasts, including Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube, Rumble. Please follow us on YouTube. Please follow us on Rumble. We really would like to build the subscription base there. And I just want to remind you guys, there's a cool tour that's going on with some of our national hosts. So that's the Battleground Talkers Tour. You can go to battlegroundtour.com. For instance, right here in Orlando on October 17th, we're going to be hosting Mike Gallagher, Dennis Prager, Dr. Sebastian Gorka at Faith Assembly Church right on Curry Ford and Econ Road. But if you go to battlegroundtour.com, you can find out where the event is near you and who's going to be there. It will be one or more of the national hosts. So it'll be a great time. Questions, you can ask questions, so on, etc. You can meet the host up close by a VIP ticket. So just go to battlegroundtour.com. Also, I just want to remind you, please support my sponsor, Mike Lindell. Mike Lindell, the patriot fighting for election integrity and being bullied by the left, the FBI. I consider them part of the left. Now, it's really sad where we've come with the FBI, but nonetheless, Mike Lindell is standing up for you. He's standing up for American jobs and American manufacturing. He is a patriot. You can support him and support this podcast by going to mypillow.com, clicking on the radio listener square. Use the promo code Carl for any purchase you'd like to make. The same is true if you'd rather call 1-800-858-0263. Use that promo code Carl, C-A-R-L, 1-800-858-0263. Right now, the Percale bed sheets are still available in a variety of sizes and colors. You get the queen set. They normally sell for $89.98, but for you, my listeners, they're $39.98 if you use the promo code. The same is true for the Giza Dream Sheets. So check those deals out. But anything that's available on mypillow.com, use the promo code Carl and get any promo, if you will, that will apply to you, or discount that will apply by using that promo. Now, I want to talk about something that's a little different here. I'm going to be sitting in for Dennis Prager today, but something hit me. I was thinking about this raid that happened yesterday, and we spoke about it yesterday on the podcast of this Mark Houck, who's a pro-life activist, just sitting out in front of an abortion clinic and trying to preach the gospel, share the gospel, and counsel some of the women that are going into the clinic. And the FBI is coming after him now. And I started really thinking about this. And it led me to what I want to talk about today, which won't be a long topic, but I think a very important topic for those of us that are conservative to combat the left-wing narrative about J6 rioting, because I think this all stems from there. They started with J6, and then they tried to find any controversy possible. The left did, the FBI has, in order to try to entrap or make conservatives look bad for the sake of the election. And it all started with J6. They may even be rolling out the J6 Commission again, which I think will go extremely badly for them. But nonetheless, that's what the right, or that's what the left, the radical left, intends to do. And sadly, part of our FBI is a part of that. But I started really thinking about this, what's happening with the FBI. And I just want to caution everyone out there, don't take the bait. I don't think you will. But I just want to caution you, this is really hard. We see our fellow patriots, our fellow Americans being jailed unnecessarily so when it comes to the J6 protesters. We see the entrapment by the Gretchen Whitmer case, where the FBI were the biggest criminals, almost, if you will, in that particular case, entrapping some Americans in the Michigan area in this plot to kidnap Whitmer, where there were just as much, if not more, actually more FBI informants involved in that kidnapping plot. Absolutely insane. But this is what the FBI is doing. But it also hit me. I was like, what? This makes no sense. It makes no sense what the FBI did with this particular guy, Mark Houck, when apparently this case had been thrown out of a out of a federal district court over a year ago, it made no sense to me. And I really started thinking about it. And eventually what I'm going to get to is talking about 3 separate times there were riots at the Capitol that people don't talk about. And I want to brief you on those. But it just hit me. You know what the left is trying to do? You know what the FBI is trying to do? I realize that the FBI is now the law enforcement arm of the DNC. Dr. Sebastian Gorka says they're the Biden's Gestapo, which I think is fitting. Sadly, I think more FBI agents need to come out. Dan Bongino had a whistleblower on his show, just magnificent interview with that particular gentleman, and more appear to be coming out, and that's good news. But it hit me that what happened with this guy, this Catholic pro-life speaker, was the FBI, in my opinion, are working on behalf of the DNC, the FBI, the DOJ, are working on behalf of the DNC to try to change the narrative leading up to the midterm election back to abortion, in the same way that Ron DeSantis was able to refocus the narrative on the open border crisis leading up to the election. I think this is what's going on. I haven't heard anybody mention this or take this take on it, but if this is true, and I believe it to be true, it proves that the FBI is just an extension of the Democrat Party, which is even more reason why they need to be busted up, in my opinion. Now, let me get to the 3 other riots that occurred at the Capitol that were worse than the J6, mostly peaceful protests. There were 3 previous acts of violence perpetrated at the Capitol before January 6th. And guess what? They were all from people on the left. Most of the commies had their sentences commuted by Democratic presidents, and we'll talk about that as well. But there was an attack in 1954 that was a shooting of members of the House Representatives by a terrorist supporting the cause of the Puerto Rican separation from the United States. No, Gabe was not involved in that. I just want you guys to know that. In 1971, there was a bombing by a domestic terrorist group known as the Weather Underground. Barack Obama's homie was involved in that. We'll talk about that. And there was another one 12 years later involving more people from the Weather Underground group as well. But they identified themselves as the Armed Resistance Unit. And we'll talk about that. But first, let me brief you on the 1954 attack. Again, there were 3. One in 1954, one in 1971, one in 1983. I want you to be informed about this because you can share this with your friends, your family, when they try to bring up J6. Listen, what about the Capitol riots that were worse, the Capitol violence that was worse at the hands of left-wing radicals, people on your side of the aisle? Let's talk about that. Well, the March 1954 shooting was really bad. 3 men and 1 woman. Here were the name of the men: Rafael Cancel Miranda, Irving Flores Rodriguez, Andres Figueroa Cordera, and the woman was Lolita LeBron. They entered the House of Representatives and at the visitors gallery. It hangs over the floor of the House, apparently. They proceeded to observe the lawmakers debate the subject of migrant workers from Mexico. And then at one point, the 4 got up, and then LeBron shouted, Lolita LeBron, that's the female, she shouted, Viva Puerto Rico Libre, which means long live free Puerto Rico. And then they unhurled the Puerto Rican flag over the banister, if you will. And then all 4 of them took out semi-automatic pistols and just started unloading on the crowd. The 4 terrorists, they ended up wounding 5. Thank God they killed no one, but they wounded 5. This happened in the House of Representatives. But you don't hear the left talking about this. Now, it ended up that probably 23 years later, President Jimmy Carter commuted their sentences. One, he commuted before the others. He commuted Figueroa Cordero first, and that was because the guy had cancer. After he was released from prison, he wound up dying, I think 2 years later. Then there were the others. Carter's Secretary of State, Cyrus Vance, said they released the others. They released the others as a humanitarian gesture. So they released them. This was he said 25 years was long enough that they had spent in jail. And so that was that. So they released them, and these people went on to live very, very long lives. One of them just died a couple of years or so ago. And again, this terrorist attack was in 1954, and all of them, you should know, were unrepentant. So that was the first attack, 1954, right? And that was by the, what was the name of this group? Now I'm getting flustered here, but that was the Puerto Rican terrorist group. And so that was the first one. That's what I want you. That's what I want you to know. And then in 1971, there was another terrorist attack. Now, no arrests were made on this one. This is crazy. No arrests made. Look at all the arrests that were made from January 6th protesters, where people literally just walked into the building thinking they were basically on a tour, ushered into the Capitol building, in some instances by police officers that were there on guard. Nancy Pelosi should have been in charge of this stuff. She knew that there wasn't enough security, and I believe they totally set these people up. They've even arrested people that were in the vicinity. You have Dr. Simone Gold that gave a speech there. She was arrested as well. Now let's go back to 1971. Now we're talking about the Weather Underground, and I'm so frustrated that I have. I'm sorry. I'm just looking through the notes here, and I'm just a little frustrated that I forget the name of the Puerto Rican group. The Puerto Rican, they were part of the Puerto Rican separation. That's what it was about. It was over the Puerto Rican separation. So that was the first terrorist attack, 1954, 1971. You go back, no arrests were made on this particular one. Nor were charges filed. Hat tip to the Daily Signal for this information. With the 1971 bombing of the Capitol by the Weather Underground, there were no sentences to commute. No one was ever arrested. The bombing did cost $350,000 worth of damage. I don't know what that would be in today's money, but that was obviously a lot of money back then. It would be a lot of money today. According to an author by the name of Brian Burrell, the man known as the bomb guru of the terrorist group, his name is Ron Fleigelman, said years later that he, quote, believes, unquote, he may have built the device. The weatherman said they were protesting the invasion of Laos by U.S. supported South Vietnam. The Weather Underground was formed in 1969 by a handful of wealthy or middle class white students, including Bill Ayers, who, after emerging from hiding, transformed into a college professor at the University of Chicago. He also went on to be former President Barack Obama's political mentor. Bill Ayers did. He also hosted, if I recall correctly, the first fundraising event for President or then candidate Obama's presidential race or presidential run. It's unbelievable. So these guys came from a group that was a peaceful group. They wanted to spread communism throughout the United States, but they wanted to do it by peaceful means. Initially, the group was called Students for a Democratic Society. I believe that group continued to exist, but the Weathermen, they were committed to spreading communists through revolutionary action, through violent means. That's what they wanted to do, and that's exactly what they did, with Bill Ayers being one of them, Barack Obama's former political mentor. Then there's another one, the third one. So you have 1954 by this Puerto Rican separation group. And then you have 1971 by the Weather Underground. 12 years later, 1983, the Weathermen were at it again. They set off another bomb that tore through the second floor of the Capitol's north wing. All right. This, according to the U.S. Senate history site, moments earlier, a group called itself the Armed Resistance Unit. They called in a warning to the Senate switchboard, but lives were spared only because debate had ceased earlier than expected. So they would have literally killed senators. They did about $1 million in damage in 1983, which has to be astronomical considering the inflation rates today. So that was unbelievable. 1954, 1971, 1983, all by leftists. And the reason they gave was U.S. military involvement in Lebanon and Grenada. Now, 7 of these people were arrested, but they were arrested 5 years later. In 1988, it says here, the FBI arrested and charged 7 men and women for the execution of the blast. They included Marilyn Jean Buck, Linda Evans, Susan Rosenberg, Timothy Blunk, Alan Berkman, Laura Whitehorn, and Elizabeth Ann Duke. And as of this writing, this last chick, Elizabeth Ann Duke, has not been found as of yet. All were either members of the Weather Underground or they had some link to it. Some were also closely associated with the May 19th Communist Organization, quote unquote. That's the name of it, May 19th Communist Organization. So I just want you to understand. Oh, actually, it says here. Let me just go on real quick. Some of them pleaded deals and were eventually charged for other crimes. Some others were paroled, and one of them, Duke, again, is still on the run with a heavy FBI reward out for her. Maybe that's changed as of today. I don't know. 2 of them were serving long sentences in 2001. Evans, a 38-year sentence. Rosenberg, a 58-year term, but not for the Capitol bombing, but for a New Jersey weapons case. Then in his last day in office, with only 2 hours left, you had President Bill Clinton that pardoned both of these people. Rosenberg is now the vice chairman of the board of Thousand Currents, the deep-pocketed funder of hard left causes, unbelievable, which until last July was the fiscal sponsor of Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation, the BLM organization. Isn't that amazing? In 1989, in a 1989 interview she did from prison, Rosenberg said, and I quote, "One of the things that's clear is that the government is trying to get us to reassess, to apologize, to get us to say we won't ever do anything again. And for all of us, certainly for myself, I'm not going to say that to the greatest terrorist state in the world," speaking of the United States, quote unquote. So that's just an example of what the left has done to terrorize America, and they did so by attacking the U.S. Capitol building. Crickets, absolute crickets. And then you have Jimmy Carter commute the sentence of some, and then you have Bill Clinton that actually of all of the group related to the Puerto Rican separation movement. He commuted every single one of them, all 4 of them, Jimmy Carter did, and Bill Clinton commuted the sentences of a couple, and these people went on to have lucrative careers. Yet the Day 6 riot is what we have to worry about. Guys, I just want to assure you, listen, or caution you, again, reiterate, don't take the bait. It's exactly what the left wants leading up to Election Day. The FBI, sadly, has become the law enforcement arm of the Democrat Party, in my opinion. It's despicable what they've done to this Mark Houck, but that is all to get you riled up. Everything they're doing is trying to get you to react to them so they can build a political case against you, use that narrative in the media so that they can retain control and gain even more control in the House and in the Senate, with the goal of ruling over all of us. Don't allow them to do it. But when your friends come back and they try to attack you and say you belong to some MAGA extremist group, you're some MAGA, Republican, you're some type of extremist. Look at the J6 protesters. Contraire, mon frere. Let's remind them of the 1954 terrorist attack by the Puerto Rican separation front. Let's remind them of the 1971 terrorist attack on the Capitol of the the Weather Underground group, and then again in 1983 by also the same group of people, the Weather Underground group, but also the Armed Resistance Unit, which was basically just an offshoot. So just remind them, 1954, 1971, 1983, you fools did a lot more damage to the Capitol than we ever did. This is a political stunt. Do not take the bait. Guys, I appreciate you tuning in to this edition of the Carl Jackson Show podcast. Please, again, don't forget to support Mike Lindell at MyPillow and support this podcast. Use the promo code Carl, C-A-R-L, mypillow.com. Click on the radio listener square to all of the deals that are applicable to you, or give them a call, 1-800-858 0263. And don't forget the Battleground Talkers Tour 2022. All you have to do is go to battlegroundtour.com to find out where they might be near you or nearest to you. And we will have our big dogs coming out for some of these events, some of the national events. Brandon Tatum at some, along with others, I'm sure Hugh Hewitt. But again, right here in Orlando on October 17th, we will be hosting Mike Gallagher, Dennis Prager, Dr. Sebastian Gorka at Faith Assembly. So hopefully you guys can come out to that. Hopefully I can meet you guys. I'll be there along with my buddies, the American Adversaries, Matt Buff, Roger Franklin Williams, some of the talent here in Orlando. So hopefully I look forward to seeing you guys there. But if you can't make it to Orlando, battlegroundtour.com, any other place where you might be, they may be. All right, so check it out. All right, guys, until next time, I appreciate you tuning in, but don't grow weary doing good. God bless you.